What similarities can we find in the poverty we have today that is similar to the poverty in the early 1800s?
Society has taken it upon themselves to ensure that the government will aid those who are unable to support themselves and their families. The social demographics that were affected by poverty in the past are still affected by poverty today. In the 1700s, the minority in poverty were the Narragansett tribe in Rhode Island. Because of their poverty, Native Americans were given oversight of their well being. To get oversight, they were required to be natives of their town. During the early 1800s, the government stepped in to help veterans after the Revolutionary War. Most veterans had a lower economic status and were poorer than non-veterans. In 1818 and 1832, the government had a budget surplus, so they accepted 60,000 out of 18,000 applicants to help veterans who struggled to support themselves. Later, during the Great Depression in the 1900s, one-fourth of the workforce was unemployed due to the stock market crash. The government then stepped in by dispersing unemployment checks to help those who no longer were unemployed. The minority who were most impoverished due to unemployment were African Americans, and white demanded they be fired to hire whites. Today, the government gives welfare in different forms. Such forms include Medicare, EBT, unemployment, and WEAK. These are more specific in the areas of need. The government alone is projected to spend $927 billion in 2019. Medicare is a newer form of welfare. It ensures that people who can't obtain health insurance are still covered. Medicare Advantage is under Medicare to relieve medical costs by not charging Hispanics are twice as likely as African Americans and are 10% more likely to enroll in Medicare Advantage. Around the 1830s, cities like New York, Massachusetts became bomb towns thanks to the development and growth of the Industrial Revolution. Large factory districts grew alongside new machinery and, as a result, helped produce jobs to many of the people living inside those cities. Although these new factories gave people more opportunities for jobs, there were still a number of people who were still too poor to pay their taxes. As a result, the families were unable to spend money on food, they had to rely on local charities in order to compensate for the lack of money. In modern times, the development of factories has been replaced with new businesses ventures, both big and large. However, unlike the businesses that in modern times, the development of factories has been replaced with new business ventures, both big and large. However, unlike the businesses that still remained intact in the early 1800s, new business ventures cause smaller businesses to either be replaced or lose the profit they once had. Which people are being affected by poverty? For all history, those born into poverty were the minorities. Of course, not all Americans shared equally in poverty. Recent immigrants were also overwhelmingly poor. The most prevalent means of caring for the poor with public funds in early America were poorhouses and outdoor relief. The major advantages for locally funding a poorhouse to care for dependent persons was believed as the necessity of working every day would be a deterrent for able-bodied persons who were simply lazy or shiftless. And the regimen of daily life in concrete setting would instill habits of economical and virtuous living in persons who were disputes because of moral weaknesses of self-indulgence. The United States is considered the richest country in the world, and yet millions of residents live in poverty. Poverty has become a serious issue in this country today. Over 44 million Americans live in poverty. But when did poverty become such a huge problem? In the late 1950s, the poverty rate was approximately 22%, not far from 40 million Americans living in poverty. The rate declined steadily, reaching a low of 11.1% in 1973 and rising to a high of nearly 15% three times in 1983, 1993, and 2011. However, the 46.2 million Americans in poverty in 2011 is the most ever recorded. Today, the highest levels below poverty is in Kentucky, District of Columbia, Georgia, Arkansas, and Louisiana, New Mexico, and Mississippi. Impoverished families tend to have less education, more health problems, and less access to nutritionally adequate food. They are also more likely to live in high crime areas. A higher education can lead to a more secure future, yet education is something not many are able to obtain. African Americans and Hispanic students have a lower graduation rate than other groups. They are also the higher poverty rates in the US in 2017. Minorities are still the groups living in poverty. Which people are being affected by poverty now? In 2017, among racial and ethnic groups, African Americans had the highest poverty rate, 27.4%, followed by Hispanics at 26.6%, and whites by 9.9%. Minorities in America are still the same racial groups that consisted of in early America. These minorities are still part of the low class and living in poverty. The government has issued public programs to help the poverty, but those who are involved in those programs are looked down upon by many in both the past and present.